Welcome back, Bib 1001, and we are going to now turn our attention to Genesis 22. Genesis 22, and Isaac has been born, and we think that he is now probably somewhere around 16 to 18 years old. And so the text starts out with this line, sometime later or after these things. And again, the general thinking is that we are probably, 16 years later or so. So that Isaac is, a very young man. So Genesis 22, I'll go ahead and read through it, kind of interrupt myself along the way, but really a powerful, important passage, and the whole journey of Abraham kind of comes to culmination here. After these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, "Abraham," and he said, "Here I am." He said, "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you." So Abram rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took two of his young men with him, and his son Isaac. And he cut the wood for the burnt offering and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. On the third day, Abram lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar. Then Abraham said to his young men, "Stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you." And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son. And he took in his hand the fire and the knife. So they went both of them together. And Isaac said to his father Abraham, "My father." And he said, "Here I am, my son." He said, "Behold, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering?" Abraham said, "God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son." So they went both of them together. When they came to the place of which God had told him, Abraham built the altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, "Abraham, Abraham." And he said, "Here I am." He said, "Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him was a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called the place, So Abram called the place, or called the name of the place, "The Lord will provide," as it is said to this day, "On the mount of the Lord it shall be provided." And the angel of the Lord called to Abram a second time from heaven and said, "By myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you, and I will surely multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven and as the sand that is on the seashore. And your offspring shall possess the gate of his enemies. And in your offspring shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice." So Abraham returned to his young men, and they arose and went together to Beersheba, and Abraham lived at Beersheba. Okay, so there is a lot there, and I got going and just decided to read on through it. But kind of moving back to the top, there's a few things that we need to make sure that we talk about, that we identify. We'll come back in a moment and talk about God tested Abraham, but let's take a look at what God is asking Abraham to do first. So take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering. Now, we need to understand that in their culture, there would be a huge difference between a sacrifice and a murder. So God is not asking Abraham to go murder his son. He's asking Abraham to go offer his son up as a sacrifice. See, the key difference is that in murder, a person is taking another person's life. In a sacrifice, a life is being offered to God. And so Abraham does not hear this whatsoever as God is saying, "Hey, go murder your son." Okay, that's not what he hears. That's not how it's understood in their times, their culture. It's about a sacrifice. It's about offering a son. It's about offering a life to God. And so we need to make sure that we hear that distinction and we don't kind of read our culture maybe on top of it, but we're kind of hearing it in its own terms. I understand both involve the bloodshed, both involve the death of someone, but again, big difference between murder and sacrifice. Murder, taking a life; sacrifice, offering a life. Maybe the second thing to kind of ponder is, how much does Abraham know? How much does Abraham believe? So does he really believe that the Lord is going to provide and that he and the boy will be back? Or is he just saying what he needs to say in order to be obedient, in order to do what God is calling him to do? So you'll notice he doesn't say anything to Sarah about this. He gets up, saddles his donkey, gets the wood, gets a couple of servants, gets his son, and off they go. No word to Sarah about this whatsoever. Probably wouldn't have gotten out of the house if he had told her. And then we also notice his response to the two servants or the two young men. He says, I and the boy are going to go worship, and we're going to go over there, worship, and come back to you. He doesn't say, we're going to go worship and I'll be back. He says, I and the boy will go and we will come to you again. So does he believe the boy's really coming back? Or is he just saying this in order to be able to be obedient? And then even to Isaac. Isaac wants to know, where is the lamb for the burnt offering? And Abraham's response is, God will provide for himself the lamb for the burnt offering. Is Abraham thinking that God is really going to provide and he won't have to go through with it? Or is he believing that the Lord has provided and Isaac is the lamb for the burnt offering? And so he's speaking truth. The Lord will provide. Indeed, you are the offering. So it's hard to know whether Abraham is really believing that he and the boy will be back, or if he is just saying what he needs to say in order to be obedient to God. And the two of them, they both go on together. Then we see Isaac is kind of the perfect sacrifice. He binds Isaac to the altar on top of the wood. And again, Isaac is probably 16, maybe 18 years old. That makes Abraham 116, 118, in that range. I think Isaac probably could have got away from him if he wanted to. I think Isaac could have flipped it and bound Abraham if he wanted to. Okay, but instead we see him being completely obedient, the completely willing sacrifice, allowing himself to be bound and placed upon this altar. Now, back up to God tested Abraham. There are three basic kinds of tests as I think about testing. So the one kind of test is kind of like a multiple choice, where it doesn't give you really opportunity to show what you know or what you've learned. It just kind of measures what you don't know. Okay, and so multiple choice test measures what you don't know. Okay, an essay test kind of allows you more room, more freedom to assert what you do know. And so multiple choice test measures what you know. Multiple choice test measures what you don't know. Essay test, you get a chance to write, you get a chance to show what you know. So measures what you know. Okay, the third type of test is the most important. This test doesn't measure anything. It grows you. That by going through this test, you come out different than when you started. Okay, this might be a test such as a paper that you write, where you start at one place, and by virtue of doing the paper, doing the test, if you will, the research that's involved, the thinking, the reflecting that's all involved, you land at a different place than when you started. The test actually grew you and moved you. Okay, a good coach will schedule opponents, especially in the preseason or early season, that are going to test his or her team. That by going up against that opponent, you are going to be moved to a new place than before you played that opponent. That's what we have going on here. That this is a test, not so much to see where Abraham is at, but to move him into a new place. And we see that that's exactly what happens. And so Abraham has his son Isaac bound on the altar. I'm back down at verse 10. Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here I am. He said, Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, seeing that you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Now we need to unpack that a little bit. Now I know that you fear God, for you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Fearing God. Fearing God does not mean being afraid of God, scared to death of God. I mean, there may be some of that mixed into it, but it is way more than that. To fear God is to honor God in everything. It is to worship God. It is to hold God in awe. It is to give God first place over absolutely everything. Every decision, every attitude, every action. To fear God is to worship God, to put God first in and over absolutely everything. And the Lord is saying, now I know that you fear God. And the knowing is not informational knowing. Okay, this knowing is experiential knowing. Same word for Adam knew his wife Eve. Okay, it's experiential, intimate knowing. And so what I hear the Lord saying in this, now I know, now I'm experiencing you, fearing me, worshiping me, putting me in first place like you never have before, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love. You get the picture? Abraham has been moved, tested into a new place, to where now God can say a new thing over him. Now I know, now I'm experiencing you, finally putting me in first place, finally worshiping me, finally holding me in awe above everything else, even and especially the son that I have blessed you with, because you have not withheld him from me. Kind of raises another question. When God was asking Abraham for Isaac, who was God asking for? Okay, let me say it again. When God was asking Abraham for Isaac to be sacrificed, who was God actually asking for? Yeah, you got it. God was actually asking for Abraham. See, Abraham's whole future, his whole life, it was all wrapped up in Isaac. That Isaac was his identity. It's who he was. And when he gives God Isaac, is willing to give God Isaac, he's actually giving himself to God like he had never given himself before. And so the Lord exclaims over him, now I know, now I'm experiencing you worshiping me, putting me in first, because you have not withheld from me your only son, Isaac, whom you love. Now, that's pretty amazing in itself. And the Lord provides, the Lord sees the heart of Abraham, and the test has been fulfilled, and truly the Lord provides the ram. But look with me, the next thing we hear being said down at verse 15. The angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, by myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you, and I will surely multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven and as the sand that is on the seashore. And your offspring shall possess the gate of his enemies. And in your offspring shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice. Now we hear in that the reassertion of the promise in terms of children and in terms of land. But most importantly, did you get it? Because you have obeyed my voice, because you listened to me, now I finally have you where I've been moving you to all along, so that through you and your offspring, I can bless not just you, but I can bless all the families of the earth. and in your offspring shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice. See, this is so crucial. This is what God is up to in calling Abraham way back there in chapter 12. This is God's intention. This is God's desire to bring Abraham to the place to where he fully and finally has Abraham. And my sense is that not only is this such a critical, crucial story in terms of the Old Testament and God moving Abraham into a new place so that he finally, completely, fully has Abraham, and he can say, now, because you've listened to my voice, now through your offspring, I can bless all peoples. This isn't just Abraham's story. This is Israel's story. That God wants to do this with Israel, so that God will test Israel and move them and move them and move them into a place where God can say, I finally got you. Now I know that you put me first, that you truly fear me because you haven't withheld. And so now, since you're listening to me, I can not just bless you, I can bless all. See, Abraham's story is to be Israel's story. And Israel's story is ultimately fulfilled in Jesus. That God so has Jesus, in terms of Jesus going to the cross and being the sacrifice to cover our sins. God so has Jesus that through Jesus, blessings pour out for all peoples. Atonement is made for sin for every one of us, for the whole human race. And we can receive blessing through Jesus because Jesus listened to the Father. But it doesn't stop there. This is what God wants to say over your life and my life. Doesn't want to just say this over Abraham's life. He wants to say this over your life and my life. Now I know that you fear me. Now I know that you love me with all your heart. Now I'm experiencing that I have you like I've never had you before, because you have not withheld from me, and fill in the blank. See, that's what the Lord wants to say over every single one of us. Now I know, now I'm experiencing your great love for me, that I finally have you because you have not withheld from me your and whatever. And then God also wants to say that last part over us as well, that because you listened to me, because you followed my instructions, because I have you now, not only will I bless you, but I will bless countless people through you. Remember way back in chapter 12, I will make you into a blessing. Not simply I will bless you, but I will make you a blessing. God's been up to this all along. And this is what he's up to in your life and my life. Testing us, moving us to new places, to where finally he can say, now I know that you love me. Now I'm experiencing that you truly worship me because you haven't withheld from me. And because you haven't withheld from me and you've listened to me, not only will I bless you, but I will bless countless people through you. I know I'm getting a little preachy, but my prayer is that we would know this in our own lives, and that God would be faithful, and I know he is, to keep testing us, not always enjoyable, but to keep testing us into that place where God can speak such words over us. Well, that's it for today. Have a great weekend, and make sure you get out to church so that it truly is a great weekend. And I would encourage you to spend a little extra time in Genesis 22 and wrestle with, okay, Lord, what's it going to take for you to be able to say such things over me? Have a great weekend, and I will be Zooming with you on Tuesday. And thank you again for your prayers for my father-in-law and family.